managed to not fill that completely up. All right, so moving back into the acclimatization, if you are, like, right now it's like, 50-degree days average right now, right, here on the coast. If all of a sudden we have cyclogenesis and the temperature dropped down to an average of 20, would you still be acclimated to the environment? No. These are the ways that you can lose your heat: radiation, convection, respiration, evaporation, and conduction. This is, yeah, he really does have black eye syndrome. This slide is supposed to only be for the cold weather injuries, but could you use those exact same things if you're trying to cool a patient down? Yeah. So keep those things in mind. The little black-eyed syndrome man with kneeling in the snow with a backpack. Keep that in mind. And snowshoes, yeah. So environment can also affect us, right? Whether you're at elevation, you're in the desert, you're in a snowstorm, or you're just hiking in the mountains. Heat injuries, you got your heat cramps, your exhaustion, and your heat stroke. Heat cramps is going to be your muscle spasms because you're dehydrated. Get a little worse, you're going to go into your heat exhaustion. It's even more prolonged exposure to the heat. And then heat stroke, failure of the brain's temperature to be able to regulate, right? Hallmark is altered mental status. These things can add up every day when you're in the woods. Okay? At Hunter Liggett, it gets hot as hell right there. If you have the opportunity, heat dunk. Go take an ice cold shower, ice bath, something like that. It's going to be the best thing for you. Heat stroke is a medical emergency that will result in death if treatment is delayed. Heat stroke has a 80% fatality rate if untreated. Do you need that read again?
And that's just that, not including brain.
Yes. That's just that. Brain damage, I don't know the percentage on, but I'm sure it's probably up there. Signs of heat stroke or heat exhaustion versus heat stroke. Moist, if anybody hates that word. Clammy skin, dilated pupils, normal or subnormal temperature versus hot, dry skin, constricted pupils, very high body temperature. What's the first action with it? Remove from the environment. Other treatments, stretching if you've got cramps. You'll see athletes do that a lot because they're dumb and don't drink enough water. Rapid cooling, active cooling. So we do a lot of the pits, neck, and groin, right, for the ice packs. Yes, that's good because major arteries run through those areas. But if we go back and we look at this picture, what are some other ways that we can do it? Put them on a cold table, right? Like a metal table if you got one, because that's going to disseminate the heat a lot better. That's your conduction. Your convection, how do you think you can achieve that? Get a fan. You got your trauma naked, right? So you put the cold cloths on top of their chest. That's actually better for it than just the armpits and the neck. Okay? Ice blanket, yeah. I don't know. Sorry, Moreno? Elevating the feet during a heat injury. You know anything about that? Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. All right. Dealer's choice. If you don't have a whole lot of options, get your tarp out or your poncho. What conditions must be present if you allow the casualty to drink? Conscious. That's a huge one, right? They have to be awake. Conscious. First one. Alert. Obviously, they have to be able to swallow. Can't drink tea if you can't drink tea, right? Present radial pulses and not nauseated. If they're nauseated, can they keep anything down? No. If they have absent radial pulses, they probably got something else wrong and they need an IV, right? Black eye syndrome. It affects you in the heat.
So drink water.
You drink water, though. Withholding fluids in combat victims, not recommended. Met TC, okay? There's always a time and a place for it. So, how many of you guys are on the line, just by show of hands, versus aid station hospital type? Okay. So when you're on the line, I don't know if you guys, in the aid station hospital types get it a lot, but the Joes are always like, hey, doc, let me get an IV. Most of the time it's, no, I don't got supplies. I would love to, but don't got supplies. Go drink water. Take a knee face out. So if you ever do go to the line, you may encounter that a lot. Drip drops are amazing. You can get those on Amazon. They're great for hangover recovery.
Liquid IV too.
Liquid IV, that's at Costco, right?
Yeah, you need that Costco.
Lots of good stuff out there. So when you give the casualty fluids in a rehydration type scenario, preferred lactated ringers, right? Do we want to give that salt water, pasta water, it's normal saline? Try and avoid to. It's kind of garbage when it comes to rehydration, but if that's what you got, that's what you got. Don't accept an IO if you fail. After the first 500 and you put up another bag, should you still bolus that? No. Pull it back down and let it drip slow, right? If you're in a prolonged field care situation, you're probably going to put in a catheter as well, so that way you can monitor the output. Non-freezing injuries, like hypothermia, mild is 93 to 97, moderate 86, sorry, getting a little dyslexic there, 86 to 93, and then severe is 86 and under. Conscious to AMS to unconscious, shivering, poor muscle coordination, rigid muscles, weak to absent pulse, pale, cold skin to the touch. There are cases, however, of hyperthermia saving people. Heart attacks, now they're starting to lower the body temperature because it helps preserve them. There's stories every year about some little kid falling through the ice and, the cold actually saves the kid in the long run. Slows down the metabolic rate, yeah. Not freezing hypothermia. We kind of saw that little sleeping bag kit out there yesterday with the helicopters. I think Sergeant Warren pulled a couple out somewhere around here that you can play with later if you want to. It's just a tinfoil. It's like wrapping a potato, right? Not that difficult. But they do come with a heating pad, like yay big, that are very nice. Treat your hypothermia casualties with gentleness because VFib is possible. Active rewarming should be confined to the trunk only. Why should it be just this part? Organs. The limbs can take care of themselves, right? And if you start doing, this, that's going to suck more heat out of the core. Chilblains. This is repeated exposure to bare skin of cold. So that's going to be like your nose, your cheeks, your fingers if you're not wearing gloves. red in color, tender, hot, itching. You could have some subcutaneous nodes. Treatment, go warm up. Don't rub the tissue, it's going to cause damage. Evacuate. This is what it looks like. I mean, I feel like we've all had this at some point, especially as kids. Like we didn't have gloves growing up, so we would just use socks. Not the best thing, but hey, that's what we had. It's also kind of where I think, Jack Frost is nipping at your nose comes from, maybe. Trench foot, also known as immersion. It's a prolonged exposure to feet being cold and wet. That's why you always hear change your socks, right? Especially for the Vietnam era guys, they change them all the time. The area is cold, pale, numb, tingling, pulses are diminished or absent. Later stages, the limbs are starting to feel hot, the shooting pains up the legs, blisters, swelling, redness, ulceration, numbness, excessive sweating. Cold severity may last for weeks. Hot and cold injuries, if you have one or the other, you're more likely to get again. So that's kind of what that's pointing at. That's what it looks like. Prevention is key again. A lot of things we do is prevention, right? Or try to. Snow blindness. Easiest way to think of all that mumbo jumbo, it's a sunburn for your eyeball. Wear your sunglasses.
Snow blindness cats. It's affecting more cats every year. And it's scaring the shit out of
Like I said, I've tried to make it fun for you guys because I know some of this is a little dry. Get out of there. Is it possible to get dehydrated and cold? Why? There's a lot of one person, please. Fergie, what'd you say? You don't what?
Drink less because water.
Exactly. That's a good one.
Still breathing. A lot of our fluid loss still need to drink water.
Respiration is a good way to lose water. Anybody else? That's the big one right there. So RTI, we have like the medical section, the OCS section, and then we have the infantry section, right? So I go help out with the infantry side, doing the like their FTXs and stuff like that. The last cycle I did in the snow, we had dudes that didn't bring any water on a 36-hour mission. They brought Monsters, coffee, and Red Bulls, and like a couple of snacks. Is that a good idea? No. I mean, it's the infantry, yes, but you could be a little bit smarter. I could understand, yes, I have caffeine addiction, so I need a Monster once in a while, versus I'm never going to drink water. We did have an instructor at one point, though, that the only thing he ever drank was the big white Monsters. If he drank regular old water, he would get physically ill. So we're like, how is this possible? Does your body just hate you? Like, conditioning, clearly, yeah. Yes, you can have dehydration in cold weather. I've seen heat injuries in cold weather. Maybe not heat stroke, but definitely heat exhaustion. Because again, you don't have any water. Freezing injuries is frostbite. You're going to have these at 32 degrees or lower, especially with wind chill. Black eye syndrome also helps affect it. How long does it take for this extent of an injury to be evident so you can see it? Hours? 24 to 48, a couple days. I don't care about the order, but can you name the signs and symptoms? Tingling, pain, shooting pain.
Just wondering if like cold is like warm afterwards.
So like loss of sensation? Is that what you're getting at? Sudden whitening of the skin, red gray, blisters, swelling, loss of pain, yellow waxy. That's kind of gross to see if you look at some like actual good pictures. Feels like wood. Kind of reminds me of the scene from Pirates of the Caribbean where they're trying to find like the edge of the world or whatever, and the little dude's like rubbing his foot and all of a sudden his toe comes off. That's what it reminds me of. So if you don't have any way to evacuate your patient, they may have to walk a ways, which is going to suck, but you got to do what you got to do. But do your best to avoid, it's already frozen. That's going to thaw it out, and then if it's going to refreeze, don't bother with it at all. Make sure you warm the area, but loosen your clothing, any watches, jewelry, evacuation. Consider your pain management protocols. Do not soak the frostbite. Do not rub it with snow. Why would you put ice on something that's already frozen? That doesn't make sense. Don't expose it to an extreme heat source. So if you build a fire, like what's in your little handouts, don't put your toes right next to the fire. Or your knees, yes. Don't rub it to increase circulation. That's going to cause more damage. Don't allow them to smoke or drink. Why? Yep, vasoconstriction. Again, don't expose it to open fire. Anybody played with these or not played with these, I guess? I'm sure a lot of us have. Anybody that's young? I personally don't like them because they're annoying. And they're always set up at the talk. And, we're always like a million miles away from there. So the weather there could be different from where they're at if they're down by the river or something. But they are an important tool that we have. We got to talk about them. It takes into account temperature, humidity, and airspeed. If you're using mop gear or your body armor, add 10 degrees to whatever reading is. So if it's 90, it's now 100 degrees if you're using your equipment. If you are out in BFE, get a little cheapo. Put it in your 8 bag. I used to do that because we didn't have talk anywhere close to us. A lot of the time in Delta Company, we were 30, 40 miles away from everybody else, so the weather was different. May not have been a whole lot different, but temperatures, airspeed, humidity, they can all vary. That real expensive one, don't buy that yourself, but you can order something like that through supply. Prevention, obviously you want to drink water. Don't be the dude, the infantry guy that only drinks Monsters, right? If you're thirsty, it's too late. Start slamming it. Avoid alcohol before missions. Downrange, we don't have alcohol, right? Yeah, be smart if you go downrange. Most people are going to have it. Don't be an idiot. Please don't be an idiot. I would actually add on to that a lot of caffeine. If you're going to have a cup of coffee before a mission, make sure you go poop first. That's going to suck if you're out on a mission and you got to poop. I say that because it's happened, right? Maybe not to me, maybe to somebody else, but it's happened. Make sure you drink your Gatorade. Now with those little Mios, right? Those are real easy to take electrolytes anywhere you want. The COLD acronym, keep your clothes clean, don't overdress, loosen in layers, and keep it dry as you can. Obviously, we've all played in the snow. It's kind of hard sometimes to keep everything dry. Takes about 2 weeks to acclimate, whether it's hot or cold. It progresses, increased workload the second week, right? So the first week you want to just chill. Second week, that's when you want to start getting real heavy and hot into your stuff. That's the same thing with elevation, but we'll cover that in a minute. Sudden changes in temperatures means that patient is no longer acclimated to the area. Like I mentioned earlier, hot and cold can build up, so make sure you do your hot dumps, your cold dumps. Make sure you get the right regulation of temperature. Work rest. If it's hotter, do you want to take more rest or less rest? More rest. Restrict physical activity if you can. Take breaks. So, I did not add that little note in to consider carbon monoxide precautions, but that's in there because some idiot somewhere put the exhaust into the tent, right? So make sure you check the exhaust before you turn on the AC if you're in a tent. Plan for the weather. Obviously, we've had great weather here, right? Starting this week, it's going to get a little wet. Just saying, hope you have your weather gear. Use the buddy system. I had a guy at Basic doing one of these. He's having a height injury. Got him taken care of. I'm sure we've all seen something like that. How is fluid resuscitation managed? What? Bingo. Lactated. 500. Fluid resuscitation for cold weather injury. That's a great way to do it. Joes are going to drink warm fluids when it's cold and cold fluids when it's warm. That's the best way to get it. Warm sugary drinks is what that's getting at. So your hot chocolate, that kind of stuff. Warming tents. Altitude injuries. Typically they start occurring at 6,500 feet. Most injuries will actually happen at 10,000 or more. Has anybody been up to 10,000? Fergie? Where were you at? Denver? I guess, yeah. At Kosovo, I think the highest we got was what? 6,000? Something like that? So we were huffing and puffing for sure. You know, we as the medics are responsible for keeping an eye on everybody for altitude sickness. If they've had a previous altitude injury, it can happen again just like the cold and hot. So acute mountain sickness is the most common disorder. High altitude cerebral edema. It's potentially fatal condition with acute brain swelling due to rapid ascent in altitude. High altitude pulmonary edema. The pulmonary edema, the fluid fills the alveoli. And in an unacclimatized individual after too rapidly ascending. Easiest way to remember this is if somebody's starting to have issues at altitude, move back down the mountain. Provide oxygen if you can. If you have a sat phone or something, call Mo, because generally they don't go to the field. Like we mentioned, proper acclimatization. Altitude and weather, they're both 2 weeks, if anybody's wondering. Yeah. Have issues, start headed down. So staged ascent, this is what people that climb Mount Everest use a lot, is they'll go up to an altitude, hang out for a few days, go a little bit higher, hang out, go a little bit higher. The graded ascent, you go up to a higher altitude during the day, and then at night you come back down to sleep. And then go up a little bit, come back down to sleep. 10,000 is usually normal. 6,000 is when you're going to start seeing injuries. Who can answer that? Let's go back down. All right, Spider-Man. Close your eyes for the next slide, please. Name the arthropod. Brown recluse is on the left. What's the other one, do you know? Wolf spider. Yeah, we didn't cover it, but it's a wolf spider. Okay, Spider-Man, you're clear. What are these guys? What's the other one? They kind of look similar, though. I get it. How about these guys? One person, sorry. Cockroach, sandfly. Looks similar to a mosquito, though. Now is your mosquito. What's the other guy? All right, so this one, you guys can just relax a little bit. There's more video than me yakking on this one. But I just want you to be aware that, space eventually will be in our wheelhouse. May not be in our generation necessarily, but like the youngins coming up, they're going to have to deal with it more. But we're going to talk about cosmic rays, zero-G, mutated germs, and close encounters. Hey, Star Trek, man. So this dude, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but that was the first human ever in space. April 12th, 1961. He launched from what is now Kazakhstan and landed near the Russian city of Saratova.
So all the things that the Human Research Program is investigating, the biological consequences of radiation exposure are one of the major ones. Some of the reasons for that is that the health consequences following radiation exposure are a very complex process. It's difficult to quantify exactly how radiation is interacting with tissue, and then it's even more complicated to try to quantify and determine what the long-term outcomes are going to be in terms of things like carcinogenesis, central nervous system effects, and detriment to central nervous system.
Primary means by which radiation affects cells is by damaging DNA. You can get breaks in strands and double helix, you can knock bases out, and the cell will make an attempt to repair that damage. Sometimes it's effective, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it will actually get repaired, but in an error or fashion, so it will misrepair. So anything that sets into the genome in that way is a mutation. And the accumulation of mutations can potentially lead to cancer, everything along cancer cell and normal cell, and major transform into a cancerous one. So that's a big concern.
So on Earth, there's a couple of characteristic things that are different from space. One of them is that the type of radiation we experience on Earth is generally what we refer to as low LTC radiation. Things like gamma rays and X-rays. We also have the protection shielding of the Earth's magnetic field and the atmosphere, which shields a great deal of radiation. And then finally, we have things like radiation protection concepts such as time and shielding distance. So we can reduce the time of exposure on Earth, we can reduce the distance from the radiation sources, and we can reduce the exposure to shielding. In space, a lot of those things are very different. So we have a very complex radiation field that includes things like protons and all the particles on the periodic table of elements. They're coming in at energies that are approaching the speed of light, and then difficult to shield against. And they're always there. So the concept of time really doesn't make sense because you can't reduce the exposure in space except perhaps getting them much faster. You can't really reduce the distance at all because the radiation is everywhere. And shielding concepts for galactic cosmic rays are very difficult because of the energy involved.
So who knew about rays like that? Anybody? One person? Yeah. Eventually, when we have a halo type force, that is going to be something that we're going to have to look at. Obviously, technology is going to get better between now and whenever we put boots on ground in Mars. So we may not have to worry about some of that stuff. but it's something that we need to start thinking about. The Antarctic Impulse Transient Antenna, or ATA. The experiment began in 2006. It was meant to detect neutrinos, which is a type of cosmic ray coming down from space onto Antarctica. They found that, but they also found neutrinos going the opposite way, going out into space from the ground. Recently, they decided that may be signs of a parallel universe where time runs backwards. I'm a nerd. I find that stuff fascinating.
In 2016, astronaut Scott Kelly returned to Earth after nearly a year on the International Space Station. But when he came back, he was 2 inches taller. So, what exactly happened up there, and what does that mean for the future of space travel? If you're planning a trip to the International Space Station, be prepared to feel weightless. The station orbits the planet every 90 minutes, moving at more than 17,000 miles per hour. That's 30 times faster than a commercial jet aircraft. As a result, astronauts on board live in a constant state of freefall, or weightlessness.
Being up there in microgravity is awesome. It's like the coolest thing because it's like getting powerful.
That's Garrett Reisman, a former NASA astronaut who's logged 107 days in space. There are a few immediate side effects he says when you first experience microgravity.
So first thing you really feel is you feel kind of sick. You don't feel very good those first couple days. It's kind of like being airsick or seasick. We call it space adaptation sickness. Your vestibules, your organs that provide information to the brain about your rotation and your acceleration, they're not working that great without being in gravity.
Without gravity working on your body, your bones and muscles start to break down too. In fact, bone density drops by over 1% per month. By comparison, the rate of bone loss for elderly men and women is around 1 to 1.5% per year. And because it doesn't take much effort to float through space, your muscles lose strength and endurance pretty quickly.
You have to work out every day. So they schedule 2 hours a day, pretty much every day while on the space station for working out. What we found was if you do enough resistive exercise, you can halt the effects of the bone loss and muscle atrophy.
Without gravity pulling them down, fluids pool in the body, tricking it into thinking it's carrying too much water.
So you have a shift in your fluid. A lot of the blood volume goes down your legs, ends up here, your chest kind of puffs up, and your face puffs up. And you can see it. If you look at pictures of us on space, it looks like we put on some weight or something, and we're all puffed up.
Swelling in the upper body puts pressure on the eyes as well, which can cause vision problems.
So a lot of us, including myself, had a shift in our vision while we're out in space. You start out everything's fine, and all of a sudden, things get blurry. We can see the effects of it. We can see swelling in the optic nerve, but we're still not 100% sure exactly what's causing it, how to stop it.
With all the challenges of space travel, one benefit is you actually get taller.
So yes, you do get taller.
Bernie is talking about space.
Your spine is being compressed by gravity. So we go into the microgravity environment, and you're no longer having any kind of compressive loads on the spine at all. It stretches, and I go back.
Without gravity working against it, the heart doesn't have to work as hard to pump blood throughout the body. Over time, this could lead to the heart actually decreasing in size.
There is an effect on the cardiovascular system about being in space. You do get a reduced aerobic capability. You can be in great shape, and after being up in space for a couple of days, you might get on the treadmill and be like, man, I must not have been in the gym.
The immune system also takes a hit. Researchers discovered that the lack of gravity weakens the functions of T cells, which play a crucial role in fighting off diseases. Another concern is cosmic radiation. Astronauts on the station are exposed to over 10 times the amount of radiation that we get on Earth.
At a couple of miles below the atmosphere, but we're still well below the magnetic field of the Earth. But we still get a large bit of protection from that magnetic field. In fact, you can tell because when you close your eyes, you see little lightning bolts. And that's actually a result of some of the radiation in your eyeballs releasing photons.
Artificial shielding on the ISS only partially protects astronauts from harsh radiation, leaving them more susceptible to cancer and other diseases later in life. Finally, astronauts must also be able to handle the psychological challenges of confinement and isolation.
So there is a psychological aspect to being in space, both because of the fact that you're isolated from the rest of humanity. It was really strange to be looking out the window at billions of people that had no way to get to. I was there and only had 2 roommates at the time on the space station. So if you don't get along with somebody, that could be bad because you don't have some choices in making new friends.
And without a 24-hour sleep cycle, astronauts' circadian rhythm is thrown off, which can cause more stress and lead to sleep disorders.
You take a jet lag to haul up the street. Well, the reason is that you go around the planet once every hour and a half. So for every 45 minutes, the sun is either rises or sets. So you can't tell what time it is when you're out.
So, what does all this mean for the future of space travel? Well, a trip to Mars would expose astronauts to even more dangers than those on the International Space Station. They would face higher levels of radiation, shifting gravity fields, and longer travel times, which would compound all of the negative effects of space on the human body and mind.
I think the biggest issue we have with the radiation, we don't know precisely what that exact radiation does to human beings. But what does gamma rays or what does heavy ions, what they do to human tissue? We don't really know.
Right now, NASA and other research organizations are working to develop better technology that protects astronauts against these hazards. So maybe one day humans might make it to Mars.
Yeah.
You said there's another one that they talked about where it actually changed with the twins. They definitely tested them, showing how space can right?
Yeah, like you said, we don't know the effects of those cosmic rays, right? And in the previous video, it talked about, whatever the photon is or whatever coming in, hitting your DNA and breaking off a piece of it. Like, we don't know the long-term effects of what's going on out there. But some of the stuff we do know right now, bone density, having issues, your heart can shrink, you're going to start turning into the Grinch. Hopefully it doesn't go too small, and you have to grow back up again, right? You get taller. That's kind of a cool one, I guess. More susceptible to cancer. It's like the stuff that we talk about here on Earth, like some of those issues. It's the same thing in space, but more complicated because there's no gravity. The best way to prevent any of that, don't go to space, or hurry up and invent artificial gravity, right? Anybody else see any other possible issues as far as like the body goes up there?
Not like short. I don't know. Pregnancy.
No gravity.
Actually, pregnancy, yeah, that's a one I haven't looked into yet, but
Gravity plays.
yeah.
Gravity.
Yeah. Believe it or not, Disney, back in the 50s and 60s, had plans to make like space stations like what we have at ISS, but the rotating kind, so it has the gravity. It may not be normal gravity, but it's a little bit better. So there are options out there. Thankfully, we don't have to depend on the government alone anymore to figure out all of our space stuff. We have, Musk and his Dogecoin. Mutated germs, that's another thing that could be out there. Anton found bacteria on the outside of the space station while he was cleaning it one day. But then NASA's like, no, you didn't actually find that. NASA's kind of afraid of what could we find out there. Currently, they're putting together a panel of like rabbis and priests and imams and that kind of stuff from all over the world, all different kinds of cultures, to be like, if we find life, how do we present this to people? That's something that they're thinking about right now. They just launched Christmas Day, a new telescope that's going to be looking further into space than we ever looked before, trying to look into the past. On Venus, a couple years ago, they found phosphine, which is the best way to describe it is you go to the penguin exhibit at the zoo, you smell that nasty, that's phosphine. It's a sign or signature of potential life. So what they were thinking was there may be in the Venusian atmosphere some sort of germ or something like that, because the ground is too hostile for life. But there are extremophiles here on Earth as well, down in Antarctica. So it's possible. Close encounters. Abductees, if you follow UFO reports, or now UAP, they often describe the smell of urine. So the little grays that everybody talks about, apparently they urinate and defecate through their skin. So what kind of, if we'd have to go touch them, should we be wearing gloves, that kind of stuff? Who knows what kind of alien life is out there, right? I mean, Star Trek, Star Wars, Stargate, those universes, they don't really talk about the quarantine type things and the healthcare of encountering another species. In Star Trek, you have Captain Kirk sleeping with everything that he can find. Basically a Marine, right? What kind of sexually transmitted diseases could you potentially have? They don't talk about that. So that's something we got to start thinking about now.
I'd be more worried about that diseases that they use to them.
Yeah, and that's the other side of the coin too. They may affect us, but if you look at War of the Worlds, we infected them. The common cold killed off that alien invasion in the movie. Some chicken noodle soup. Yeah. Give them the COVID. That'll kill them off, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something to start thinking about. Is what I'm trying to get at. What kind of medicine are we going to practice in the future with extraterrestrials? In summary, we got a lot to look at as far as environmental threats go. Whether that's in the office, you're dealing with bugs and snakes. Somehow you get to space and you're chilling on the space station. You're in some kind of extreme weather event. There's a lot to look at and a lot to prepare for. Does anybody have any questions? He's healthy, but his eyes are looking a little red, I think. All right, class leader, if you want to put him on a break, go for it. All right, paying 10? I'm done.
Oh, you're done?
Yeah, that was it.